Yo guys, what is up? Max on a Borderlands 4 video, and today we finally got the patch that we've been waiting for. This is probably our biggest patch to date. It includes a bunch of changes, quality of life, balance tuning, updates to the game, the new Hearts of Kairos event, and more. We're gonna be reading through and breaking down everything you need to know. Then we'll go over the weekly changes, like where Maurice location is, and then we'll get into my opinions of the patch. I'm gonna kind of read through all of the things first, and then I'll kind of give you my breakdown of if I think the changes are good or not. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get right into it. All right, so to start, update notes. Hello, Vault Hunters. Can you believe we've already shared more than a month of mayhem together in Borderlands 4? To celebrate, we have an update that includes widespread stability improvements, multiplayer fixes, UI polish, and a suite of quality of life upgrades across visual, audio, and accessibility. It also addresses various reported issues for Vault Hunters, including major balance tuning, loot systems, gear, and achievements, further refining late-game mission flow and overall player experience. We'll monitor the community closely for feedback and respond after the changes have settled. This measured approach to your input will provide a consistent and better experience. As a reminder, our primary goal with balance adjustments is to provide you the greatest number of viable builds. And then they also note that if you are playing on PC, to please update to the latest drivers, as NVIDIA has addressed a number of GPU crashes. Also, you need to restart your game and download the update if you want it to apply. If you don't restart your game and download the update, you won't get it. So, to start, we've got the Hearts of Kairos event. This is a free mini event that will be live from October 23rd to November 6th. This includes the new Murmur Legendary T-Door Assault Rifle and the Scully Legendary Order Grenade to the rewards for world bosses across Kairos. These special drops will only be available during Hearts of Kairos and delivered to the reward center. So if you kill a boss during this event, that boss will not drop the new loot. You have to go into the reward screen and claim it from your rewards. It's not a guaranteed drop, but that is where you get the gear. If you're looking to farm this, you kind of just have to drive around the world and look for pop-ups of the world bosses. Next, progression, loot, and rewards. They reduced the specialization respec machine cost from 5,000 iridium to 1,500. That's huge. That's literally a handful of vile bounties to do before you can respec. Really like that change. I wasn't sure if they were going to touch on that, but it's going to allow respecing and messing around with more builds a whole lot easier and a whole lot faster. So good change there. They added drops to a certain boss fight that was not dropping loot. This is RJ. RJ is going to be dropping now the AC May, the Fisheye, and the Guardian Angel. Very cool that those, which were world drop only, now basically have a dedicated source. They also, there's a lot of changes here. I'm not going to read through every single one. The echo logs being bugged basically on your first character, where you couldn't get 156 echo logs. They've now updated that, so if you get 155, you get the achievement and the cosmetic. So that is fixed. They improved equipment handling when opening rewards while driving. The Lost Loot Machine got a bunch of changes. Lost Loot Machine logic updated to better prioritize high-quality loot in overflow situations. Lost Loot Machine SDU upgrades now properly expand slots in multiplayer sessions. Addressed a reported issue with the Lost Loot Machine that could cause duplication in multiplayer. Loot enemies drop more cash. They changed some things with the reward center and claiming your rewards. They also did a bunch of challenge tracking, ensured that bobblehead collectibles in Pester's Grotto and Motherbird No were accessible. Apparently you couldn't get to some of those. They've adjusted various fast travel locations, vault key animations, echo log pickups, objectives being bugged, and improved various instances of mission waypoints not showing up accurately. For gunplay or gameplay and missions, Maurice's Black Market Vending Machine is now able to be interacted with reliably in multiplayer. This wasn't working. Good change there. Vend of the Lion Legendary Machine won't randomly close. They made general improvements to prevent enemies from getting stuck when spawning. This is addressing also bounties not spawning. So they addressed bounties. We've also got a lot of changes to an issue in co-op during the Splashdown boss fight, leading to more consistent behavior. Bunch of echo improvements, enemies not clipping through walls. They patched collision gaps, holes clipping, and invisible walls. Desync, pangolin enemies can now be damaged while grenades, while in ball mode. Just a bunch of general changes. Next, we get to the Vault Hunter changes. The first of which is Harlow. They addressed some Gravatar builds that reportedly caused performance slowdowns. This was if you were spec'd into like the red tree, where you'd have a skill that would give you a chance to entangle additional enemies or spread entangle. That was bugging out and causing real bad performance issues. That hopefully is no longer happening. The Gravitar passive and augment bonuses to gun damage now correctly apply to Ripper heavy weapon barrels and Ripper legendary heavy weapon, the Streamer, and entanglement interactions also function as designed. Gravitar class mods have been adjusted to no longer roll +5 pencils down and push passives past their intended cap. If you didn't know, you could get like a +6 class mod into a skill that would only have 5 skill points, so that was adjusted. Then we get to the big one. Creative burst, balance adjustments. Neutron capture now converts all gun damage into radiation and now only applies to gunshots and not all instances of gun damage. Dev note, neutron capture is one of the best damage scalers in the entire game, but during testing, we found that this was erroneously applying to all instances of gun damage and was able to scale in unanticipated ways as a result. This new change will still see neutron capture being one of the best, if not the best damage scalers in the game, but the power level will be much more in line with our expectations. Additionally, since all damage from the gun is converted into radiation damage, it should have more scaling vectors for clever build crafters and allow for meaningful boosts from gun damage. So we've got an additional way to scale neutron capture with gun damage. The big change here is that neutron capture no longer applies to instances of gun damage that aren't directly from your gun. AKA, if you're using the Katagawas and shooting all those lightning orbs constantly proccing all that damage, no longer proc neutron capture at all. So, like, you just can't really use a Katagawa's Revenge for neutron capture. I've got to do a ton more testing with this. I tested quickly the conversions. It didn't seem like all of the conversions extra projectiles all hitting after you shoot your first shot were proccing neutron capture. So basically, this means that neutron capture is going to be doing the same damage, if not more in some instances, but you're going to have to basically use how we were doing it when the game first came out, and that's using like high fire rate weapons like the Buri, like the Madludi, so that you're just going to be spraying bullets out, and that's how you proc neutron capture rather than procking it from all these extra instances. That also means that you can't do, like, for example, a grenade neutron capture build, because you could make grenades do gun damage, and then those would proc neutron capture. That is now fixed. For Cosmic Brilliance passive, Flux Generator Annihilation interaction updated, so spawn grenades now scale properly with character level. Then we get to Amon changes. They made shield visual adjustments for improved clarity in combat situations. If you were holding up his shield, you literally couldn't see anything. That's been improved. His Forge skill adjusted interactions with the Forge Master class mod, so Forge skill now respects its cooldown in multiplayer. Good change there. Onslaughter Calamity, camera behavior stabilized when combining Onslaughter with Order Legendary Pistol, the Noisy Cricket, and attack frequency of Rocket Punch is now consistent in multiplayer. Balance adjustments, they called this Seeing Red. They like slightly misnamed this. This is There Is Only Red, and they changed this so duration restored no longer increases per point invested and is now 4 seconds at all ranks. If you ranked up Seeing Red, this would give you more duration restore for your Berserk to keep your Berserk always active. It would start at like 3 points. I believe it would get up to 9 seconds whenever you'd kill an enemy. So you only need to kill an enemy once every 9 seconds to keep up your Berserk. This is now only 4 seconds. So you need to get a kill every 4 seconds to keep up Berserk. And they said, Dev Note, Seeing Red was always meant to have a huge damage scaling potential, but was always meant to be hard to maintain. We didn't want to nerf this passive's power, but we're making the effect harder to maintain. So basically, Berserk is still as strong, but it's going to be harder to keep up at full stacks. Next, Scourge Vengeance. Scorch Kairos passive now displays consistent magazine values for the Ordnance gadget. Forge Waves no longer fire unintentionally during Glacial Rapture. Projectiles no longer get stuck in the air with Forge Firewall. Blackout. Shock damage now properly scales with points invested. This is something we've been asking for since the game launched. Blackout is potentially one of Amon's like strongest skills, and it just like wasn't working. So now it will work, meaning Ordnance Amon is going to be even crazier. But they adjusted Blackout, so now Blackout is only 15% per point, down from 21%. They said after fixing the scaling of the damage over time for Blackout, we found that Blackout was overperforming a bit, so we gave it a slight readjustment. This still will be an overall buff now that the dot properly scales. So they toned it down a bit. Honestly, like on paper, this is still going to be one of his strongest skills. That with Comet is going to be ridiculous. So excited to check that out. Crucible Cybernetics, visually corrected, so Forge Knight Forge Axes no longer disappear when activating Crucible at the same time as throwing the double edge. Corrected animation of Crucible while climbing, and Raging Inferno. Incendiary damage now properly scales with points invested. This is also something we've been asking for. Raging Inferno gives his action skills when they crit guaranteed burn procs. I just got a 10 out of 5 class mod for this yesterday, which would give me, anytime I crit my action skill, 120% burn dot off of that. That will now properly scale. I'm very much excited to try to check that out with Molten Royal. Should be interesting. But yeah, the Raging Inferno is fixed. For Vex, the Siren, they changed Challenge Me, Myself, and I now tracks correctly in multiplayer, independent of clone duration or other players. Dead Ringer for a seal. Spectre's copied weapons now display proper visual effects when firing with a Malawan Elemental Switcher. Incarnate Vexcalation. Bleed from Bloodletter has been updated, so it no longer recursively triggers itself, preventing unintended damage loops. This is the Bleed fix or nerf. Basically, if Bleed crit, Bleed was a skill. If you bleed procs off of skill critical hits, so bleed critting could then proc itself and then continuously proc itself. Bleed scales off the damage dealt, so it would just recursively lead to infinite amounts of damage. That no longer will be happening. For Trouble, they buffed the illusion damage multiplier to 75%, up from 50. They buffed the duration of the illusions to 8 seconds, and the Apex beast damage dealt increased from 15%. Or to 15% from 10% per stack of unsealed. By the way, just quick note, I will talk more about my thoughts at the end of the video, but I don't think these are enough buffs for Trouble. We'll have to see. I haven't messed around with it yet, but I really think Trouble needs like a lot of damage increases. Ralph the Exo Soldier, free grenade from Philanthropo class mod now deals appropriate damage even when no grenade is equipped. Apophis Lance. Apophis Lance changed to penalize gun accuracy instead of gun handling, resulting in projectile speed being unaffected. Apophis Lance now benefits from cooldown reduction effects. This is great. If you did not know, Apophis Lance, you just like wasn't getting cooldown properly, meaning it was really hard to upkeep. It wasn't getting now with caffeine, so if you were like stabbing yourself with a rep kit, you weren't getting the cooldown back. If you went to a vending machine to reset Apophis Lance, it wouldn't get its cooldown back. It made playing an Apophis Lance build a huge pain in the ass, and so now it'll actually work. Good change there. Then we get to gear changes. Skills that boost gun handling now properly increase projectile speed. You no longer should be getting negative projectile speed or slower projectile speed if you have positive gun handling. Great change there. They addressed reports that swapping weapons with the freeloader enhancement on an order weapon with a Ripper magazine would cause all weapons to not consume the accurate amount of ammo. Apparently, this was a bug that you could get infinite ammo on your guns. I didn't know about that. Good change there. Restoration from the legendary rep kit Adrenaline Pump now correctly works when combined with the Guardian Angel. They reduced the critical chance on the Jacob's crit knife to 30%. This is the crit knife nerf. Dev note, it had to happen. You knew it was going to happen. Pretty funny. The crit knife is no longer 100%. It's still going to be really good. 30% crit chance for 5 seconds is still very, very powerful. For example, you could spend 5 skill points on Vex and only get 15% crit chance. So having a knife that gives you 30% crit is still very good. It's just not going to be the only choice. And that's kind of their goal with this, is they want there to be other options for ordnance to use, which they said they're going to be working on. Well, we get to the buffs later, but also in the future, they want to add like more ordnance that enables gun builds. They fixed the Songbird infinitely stacking damage, so you can't use that anymore. They said using a Jacob shotgun with toric sticky projectiles and the knife launcher underbarrel no longer deals knife damage after swapping firing modes. Jacob's weapon parts updated, so ricochet effects only trigger from intended damage sources. This is the change to the like Midnight Defiance, which would like infinitely ricochet in of itself. The kickballer or like disc launchers with Jacob's parts could infinitely ricochet and one-shot an entire screen. This is now meaning the Jacob's ricochets are only ricocheting from the intended effects. So a lot of those things are fixed. The Ripper Legendary Shotgun, the Golden God overheating effect, now clears correctly when swapping weapons. I've heard that for the most part, this isn't a change to like the Golden God's damage. I have heard some people say that their Golden God isn't doing as much damage, but for the most part, Golden God should be unaffected if you're using it on like infinite ammo Rafa. Corrected behavior on Maliwan Legendary SMG. Oh my god. So the first 3 shots no longer consume ammo without dealing damage during continuous fire. The Gamma Void now correctly applies increased radiation damage. They've got a bunch of Gamma Void changes later on. Weapons with COV magazines now function correctly if a repair animation is interrupted with a rep kit in multiplayer. The Daedalus SMG, the frangible, is gone. They removed it from chest loot tables, and if you owned a frangible, it is now deleted. I'm imagining they're planning on bringing this back in a future update, but currently it is gone. The first impression reduced the critical damage multiplier of the first impression AR. Not really anything of note there. Vladov Flamethrower Underbarrel no longer deals infinite damage or bypasses bio armor. Can't shoot through immune phases with it anymore. They made a bunch of changes to grenades, properly working. The healing orbs from the kill spring can no longer heal enemies. The Cinder Shelly now triggers its voice lines less often. Terrible Cinder Shelly nerf. But yeah, it should be less distracting during combat. And lingering payload and splat pack augment projectiles no longer persist when thrown at vending machines. Then we get to gear balance. Assault rifles. They buffed the Star Helix's fire rate by 33%. That's not enough, to be honest. The Star Helix does terrible damage. 33% fire rate. I don't think it's going to be enough. I haven't messed around with it yet, but I think that gun needs more love. Bonnie and Clyde base damage increased by 40%. Pair of Thieves bonus damage increased to 150%. Cannot wait to mess around with this. I think the Bonnie and Clyde is one of the cooler weapons in the game, and it finally got some real buffs. The Bugbear's base damage increased by 40%, and its max damage from its rotary thing goes to 200%. W change there. Very excited to mess around with that. The Rowan's charge base fire rate was increased by 100%. Kind of cool. Rowan's charge doesn't do a lot of damage, but it does work with stickies, and so you can stack those stickies way faster. Lucian's flank base damage increased by 50%, and the Aegon's Dream base damage increased by 35%. Really good changes there. Can't wait to mess around with those. Then we get to Heavy Web and Ordnance. They juiced the hell out of the Gamma Void. The Gamma Void's base damage increased by 450%. Singularity duration decreased to 6 seconds from 10 seconds. Radiation damage amp increased to 50% from 40%. And the Gamma Void cooldown increased by 100%. I'm imagining this means that it is you can't use it quite as often. However, if you never have to put it away, that doesn't really impact you. Going to be trying out this on Ordnance Amon. 450% increased damage, plus singularities, plus radiation damage increases. Sounds pretty cool. They also buffed the Raven Fire by 25%. Then we get to class mods. Dev notes, class mods relating to melee damage, action skill damage, and specific one-off stats on legendaries have been buffed to make them more desirable. So, for example, melee damage on your level 50 class mods is now 60%, up from 50%. Skill damage on level 50 class mods has gone from 30% up to 45%. On Vex, the Avatar Attunement skill duration on level 50 class mods has been increased to 45%. Kindred Spirits command skill cooldown has been increased to 45%. On Amon, they buffed the Blacksmith Forge duration on the class mods by 45%, detonation damage to 60%, Forge drone damage by 20% per active Forge drone, Forge skill damage increased by 60%. These are just buffing the passives. And the Elemental's legendary effect also increases all damage dealt by Amon by 2% per active affinity stack. So buffs to the Elemental class mod as well. Gravatar Biorobot gets 60% increased hazard damage. The Skeptic stasis damage has been increased to 60%. For other gear effects that are related to melee and action skill damage have increased effectiveness. We want these builds to be pushed up a bit, but wanted to distribute the power among the various pieces of gear to make them more desirable. So rep kits, hard hitter now gives 50% increased melee damage, up from 40%. Firmware, they just buffed all of the melee damage and action skill damage on the firmwares. So you're going from 25% melee damage up from 15%, 25% melee damage up from 15%. And then the shields now give more melee damage depending on their rolls, so you can get even more melee damage on your shields. They fixed Groundbreaker later on in this. I don't think these are enough changes to make melee feel great, to be honest, but we'll have to mess around with them. And then here's the Groundbreaker change. Groundbreaker now only stores gun, action, skill, and ordnance damage. Dev note, Groundbreaker was causing recursive loops that could lead to infinite damage by storing bonus damage across the board. We still want this skill to be effective, but it should not be able to scale infinitely. We'll be monitoring melee builds after this change to make sure that they're meeting expectations, and we'll further adjust if necessary. This ultimately had to be fixed so we can establish a baseline before we investigate further buffs/changes. That makes sense. Obviously, it's really hard for them to determine how good melee is if there's something in the game that's allowing melee to deal infinite damage. So they're going to be changing that. You can't deal infinite melee damage with Groundbreaker anymore. However, they're going to be using this now as a baseline. So if melee sucks now, they'll be buffing it up even more in the future and buffed certain melee things here as well. Next, we get to UI changes, the first of which is a huge one. Sorting settings in menus now persists when swapping tabs or leaving the menu. So now if you sort by recent, when you exit, it'll be still sorting by recent. If you're sorting by level, this needed to change. It was so annoying. I don't know why it was set to like sort by manufacturer in the first place, but yeah, you can finally sort properly. And they fixed toggle junk. Behavior has been corrected to target the desired item in bank menus and in backpack. Bunch more other changes. Combat Radar now features a dedicated legendary loot indicator, making high value drops easier to spot in the heat of combat. Also an awesome change. Been really hoping for that. So now you can just look at your combat radar for those legendaries instead of just your compass. Good changes there. They also did press and hold input now cancels correctly without triggering unintended interactions. Restored full screen resolution controls and swapping behaviors. Weekly activities now populate after campaign completion. Maurice's Black Market vending machine timer updates to show correct cooldown. Good changes there. Firmware 3-piece bonuses now show cooldown icons. And Deadeye tier 3 stacks now appear in your passive bar. Great changes there. Boss bar spacing corrected when Combat Radar is active. Transfer machine naming has been standardized across the game. Travel notifications now display the initiating player's name. Bunch of changes there. Standardized update terminology across gear menus, customizations, updated localization, various texts. Good stuff there. For visuals, grapple points now show proper models instead of placeholders, and they reduce the reported instances of visual pops at cinematic starts. Bunch of audio changes, just kind of like minor stuff. Settings and accessibility. They changed air dash is now fully usable on controller when toggle crouch is set to off under accessibility gameplay. Bunch of other changes, player experience, improves stability. We're continuing to investigate and will make further improvements to stability and performance, address multiple reported issues across multiplayer, improve matchmaking, improve performance in multiplayer, refine graphics settings and shader handling, improvements made to patch reliability, and the ocean could occasionally fail to load. Interesting. I haven't come across that yet. Some miscellaneous changes, and then we get to our weekly updates. For the weekly activities, the wildcard mission is going to be Dark Subject with Vampiric, Cold-Hearted, and Invisible, and the weapon it will give you is the Kickballer, which is kind of funny that after they nerfed the Kickballer, they're now rewarding it. But yeah, Kickballer, Jacob's interaction no longer working. We'll go over Maurice in a minute, and then the Battle Wagon is the Boxy's Big Encore. Pretty excited for this one, actually, because it's on a drill site. This drops the Affinity XXL, which is a great weapon, and it can also drop the Bugbear, which was also buffed. Lastly, the Battle Wagon also drops the Completion. Maurice's Black Market vending machine is probably in the trickiest location it's ever been. This took forever to find. It is on the moon. You got to go open your Kairos map, and then go up to the Elpis Orbital Shatter Field. This is right next to the Callus Fast Travel. Travel up here, and then you need to basically go from the start and run all the way down almost to the very end of the area, where you got to do a series of jumps, which will bring you to Maurice's Black Market vending machine. What that looks like is you're going to come through this area where you've got to kind of crouch and jump through this. And then, that grenade, please don't kill me. Then you gotta basically turn left and jump up to this thing. And then one more jump, and then it is in here. Very, very tricky. I haven't checked my Maurice vending machine yet. Please, good stuff. I've got a Swarm in mine and a War Paint. Oh, War Paint's actually very good. Cool. I'll probably be grabbing myself some additional war paints. Swarm's not great. Your vending machine will be totally random for you, and now this will also probably work in multiplayer. So if your buddy got like the bod in his vending machine, you can now technically join his game and buy yourself one. So that is a very cool change. Now for like overall thoughts on this patch. Overall, I think the lot of good was done. I am happy to see a ton of these changes. A lot of really, really great changes. They made it so that you can respec more often. They updated the lost loot. They made changes to multiplayer, so multiplayer should be working better. They fixed a lot of the challenges not working. I personally don't like this neutron capture change or nerf. My main reason for that is I think it just hurts build diversity on neutron capture. Honestly, you could make a neutron capture build with grenades and have those grenades proccing neutron capture. You could use all these cool and interesting weapons on neutron capture, and now all this does in my mind is just hurt the amount of weapons that works well with neutron capture without hurting the damage of neutron capture. So like I think it's just gonna feel a bit worse to play, to be honest. So I don't like that change. I gotta mess around with it more. Amon's changes, seeing red, Berserk was like absolutely ridiculously strong. It was his best skill by far, and now I think potentially you've got more options to use. I would have loved to see some buffs to his other skills, because a lot of the reason why everyone's speccing into Berserk on Amon is because there's not many other great options. However, with the Blackout fix and others, should be really interesting. I think Ordnance Amon is going to be one of the highest damage builds in the game right now, actually, with the Blackout change. Still think they need some absolutely massive buffs to his Cybernetics tree, and possibly reworking a lot of the Cybernetics tree. The drones just need some serious love, and they got some love in this, but maybe not enough. Once again, things I need to mess around with. Trouble on Vex got some buffs. Got to mess around with that. On paper, I don't think it's quite enough, but we'll see. Bleed getting fixed, I am really, really happy about, to be honest. I know it's going to be less damage for Bleed because it was bugged to infinitely stack, but I was basically avoiding Bleed on all of these builds that I wanted to make, and I wanted to make a status effects Vex build, but you want to make your status effects crit, and if Bleed crits, then it infinitely scales. So now we can like actually make some cool Bleed builds on Vex, which I'm really excited about. Papa's Lance getting cooldown, great changes. The crit knife getting nerfed, I think, is great, actually. 30% crit is still fantastic. It's going to allow us to use more ordnance, such as like the fish slap. You can throw a fish slap and get 30% fire rate. That's now going to be more of a like interesting option to use on builds, especially if you've got free specialization points. The assault rifle buffs all look pretty good, except for the Stall Helix fire rate increase. I just don't think that's enough. Class mod changes, I feel like all right about these. A lot of like small, like 10% buffs or like 15% buffs to things. I don't think this is going to make a huge dent. I do think that the legendary effects getting changed. So like now increase all forge drone damage by 20% per active forge drone. This could be pretty interesting. And the elementalist getting the 2% all damage per affinity. That could be pretty interesting. We'll have to see how that plays out. I do wish that they had buffed other firmware besides just the melee ones, because there's a lot of firmware that isn't getting used. Groundbreaker getting fixed, need to happen. Now they can have a baseline and figure out where to buff melee builds. The last thing to mention is the like Halloween event. Gonna be honest, I'm a bit disappointed with the Halloween event. I've only done one of it, but just in comparison to basically what we got in Borderlands 3, which was a whole new area with a whole new boss and a bunch of new rewards and like 15 plus brand new anointments that completely changed build crafting and the way to make builds, comparison to basically an event that you have to drive around the world and just look for random events to get 2 new legendaries that I've heard are not that great. I definitely think is a miss. I know this is a mini event, but it does feel like it is significantly worse than what we got in BL3, which is a bummer. Overall, though, W patch, lots of good changes, lots of good things. I can't wait to finally get back into making some videos and stuff for this game, because I felt like I was kind of just waiting for this patch to come out before I could release any like updated guides and stuff like that. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the patch. A lot of new changes to mess around with. I will catch you on the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.